Hello, and welcome to our daily work remote strategies. We're thrilled you're here, and today we have a mini webinar about inquiry, why inquiry is important, how we can use inquiry, and our person who is bringing it to us today is Sandy. Hello, Sandy Lewis.
Hello, Senya. Thank you for having me.
And one big thing that I wanted to tell you about Sandy is one of our coaches as a SVC, and often when I'll pair Sandy with somebody who is a client, I will tell them, you're getting a whole HR department. So one thing, here's Sandy and you're getting a whole HR department. Sandy has run HR departments for companies, and she's worked in many, many industries, tech, biogenetics, if I'm even saying that right. So lots of different industries, and kind of knows that whole HR spectrum. So she has that lens on, as well as the lens of an executive coach. And here we go to Sandy. Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you, Senya. So you really set this up well. Two things. We're going to talk about inquiry today, and this is an approach that's almost imperceptible. So we're going to think about what kind of questions we're asking. And secondly, as Senya pointed out, I've primarily worked in organizations that are problem-solving organizations, engineering, tech, finance. So we're going to take two different approaches, or we're going to look at things a little differently. So what I'm really wanting to look at today is the types of questions we ask can help us focus in different ways. So any moment, let's just do a small exercise, right? In any moment, we can think about something good, or we can think about something difficult. So right now, right, we're on a webinar that I'm running. You might have a meeting that you're waiting for. I certainly have something after this. So that's a challenge. However, at the same time, I am so excited to be here with you, and I love talking about this topic. So at the same moment, we can have two things going on. So what are some ways that we can have shifts that's kind of like a secret tool that no one knows about that can really help us? So overall, the school of thought that I'm talking about today is called Appreciative Inquiry. And there's a lot more on this topic that I'm going to talk about. There's the Taos Institute you can look at, TAOS, as well as the Cooper Ryder Center in Champlain College in Vermont. I was certified in Appreciative Inquiry there. And what Appreciative Inquiry looks at fundamentally is that there's a positive in everything. And that's one piece. Also, that what we ask about, we see more of. And this came about, I believe, in the 1990s when researchers were looking to do organizational development PhD work, and they were going into organizations and asking the typical questions. What keeps you up at night? What problems do you have? What are your greatest challenges? And they realized that when they ask a different question, like what's working, or what do you hope, or what would you like to build on, they had more solution-focused responses versus the problem responses. So, we've all been here together with these lunchtime remote working sessions, generally positive psychology based. So what we know is when we're asking about something that shifts us to the positive, it makes us more creative. It helps us think differently. So fundamentally, what we're asking about, what we ask about, we see more of. So the applications of this can be seen in the workplace as an employee and employer. Also, I'm a coach and a consultant. I have my own business development. This can be affecting, and also personally. So I want to just share some examples today of how I've used this. When I first learned about Appreciative Inquiry, I was working in an organization, and it was a professional services organization, and one of our lead project owners was a challenging person. He was an engineer and really dove in deep to challenges and problems. So two of his employees were just always walking out of meetings feeling really uncomfortable, feeling like they didn't get to where they wanted to get because they would go down this problem-solving hole, basically. So what I suggested was that they go in and just talk about what's working on the project first. And it's not a giant stretch. Again, there's always something working. So they started doing that, going in and first sharing, let's talk about what's working on this project. And then they got into the challenges and what they needed from that boss. It shifted the relationship completely. It was subtle, it didn't feel forced, and it really opened up the conversations. So we had the opening of the conversation, what's working, and then we had, okay, what are the challenges we need to work on? Super, super important. So that was a real aha for me as I was learning about this work. I thought, wow, it really does work. So also in teamwork, how I've seen this work, one time I was going into an organization that was just a mess. It was an unfortunate situation. There was not strong leadership. There was infighting, and it was just a really, really toxic situation. So my team and I went in, and the first step was to go in and interview people and ask them about the organization. So we separately, there were 4 of us, we separately went and interviewed various groups. And I remember my first interview, and we all found the same thing. The people were, the phrase loaded for bear. They were ready to tell us like it was. And when we asked the first question, well, tell me what's working at ABC org. Silence. And then people stopped and started to talk about what's working. And then the second question, pretty fundamental. So what would you like to see more of? And then they started to generate ideas. Their energy lifted. That anger and just dissatisfaction they were starting the call with went away. And then the final question, what do you hope to see for this organization? And what we got just by asking these questions was a positive intervention. We asked about what was working, what they wanted to build on, and what they hoped for. And just by asking those questions, it started our project off beautifully, because it started people to think creatively versus negatively in that downward spiral. So that was a really great example. There also, your questions can be general like that. There's a really terrific book called The Thin Book of Appreciative Inquiry, which I have, and it's out of the Thin Book series. Really simple questions, basic questions like that are really powerful. You can also get more specific. And I went into an organization once. They were worried about siloing, and they'd had a reorganization. And so what we started the day with, we had a full day workshop ahead of us, and we started the day with a question around, tell us about a time when you worked with teams that came together under insurmountable or seemingly insurmountable obstacles. And so we paired people up. We had about 70 people each day, so 150 in 2 days about, and we paired people up and asked them this question of, tell us about a time when you experienced working in an organization where you came together over insurmountable odds. And I wasn't sure how this was going to work. The organization was really struggling because they'd had their first major reorganization in decades, I believe. And it was very tense at first. And then this question happened, and then people just started to share and share and share and share, and the energy went up. And so through that question, very specifically, we helped those people see the possibilities. And that was that question specifically that brought them to that possibility versus coming in as a separate, as an organization of separate entities. So there are a lot of really good tools available for specific questions that you might want to ask. And then business development, I help a lot of people with this. Business development is fun. It's connecting people, it's sharing, and I often get other coaches calling me and we talk about what they're going to do. And the classic questions they're going to go in with traditionally are, well, I want to go in and ask them what their pain points are. And I want to ask them what their challenges are. And my favorite, not really, is what keeps you up at night? Well, what does that do? If we think about the concept of appreciative inquiry and what we ask about, we see more of, we're actually bringing them into their problem space. So they're going to be focusing on their problems, and they're going to be more narrow. And it's really hard to get out of that cycle versus, tell me what's working about ABC organizations. You're hearing me repeat these questions, right? They're not rocket science, and yet they are profound. So what's working? What would you like to build on? Can you tell me about a time when you faced this before ABC organization? What worked then? So we're helping our clients think about what are the possibilities. Finally, if we think about taking an appreciative inquiry towards ourselves or an appreciative approach towards ourselves and our families, questions like, what went well today? What do you look forward to today? My family, so tell me what your week was like, what went well. It's subtle and it's a tiny, again, almost imperceptible shift, but it elevates and opens. So my question for you is, what's going well for you today, and how have we helped? I think that's it, Senya. I'm ready for questions.
I love that ending. What's going well for you today, and how have we helped you already? We're asking you, go ahead, type right in. What's going well today, and how have we helped you already in the past 10 minutes? Because the first two were breathing. We'll wait for the answers to come in. So Sandy, I love being the fly on the wall in these mini webinars because and I think that's sort of at a meta level. I think this is why people read business books and biographies and self-help books, is to remind us of things that we know we should be doing and that we want to do and that we want to move towards doing, that we want to aspire to. So one specific, as people are, so your task as a participant on today's call is, what are you taking away from today? Or actually, let me widen it just a little bit. What's an aha moment you had, or something that may move your thinking or actions in a different way? So please post that to us in either the Q&A or the chat. I'm looking at both. Okay, so my question to you, as people are typing that in, or as they are typing in questions, we're getting some comments, but let me ask you my question as we're getting them in. It's so delightful that you're saying in your fourth bullet point for business development, and that you've talked to other coaches about this, but really, instead of what are your pain points, what's working? What do you want more of? What do you hope to see? And it's so funny. I have a first coaching conversation myself, coming up with a potential person leader that I would be coaching in the next few weeks. And I usually have both, but of course, because they're in businesses like high tech or finance, I want to ask them what their pain points are. And I always love to ask, what would success look like if we worked together? But one thing you're getting at by saying what's working well is you're already coaching them in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then you have something to grab onto too, right? We go down the pain point and you're like, well, what do I grasp onto? How can I help you, without kind of helping them ricochet, but you're still helping them build if you're asking those questions. And they're genuine too. You don't, I think one of the problems that people see with this, or they say they see, is it seems too Pollyanna-ish or too glowing, yet it's not. And I would urge you to play with it, because when you ask that question, it takes a little courage, but you watch people light up because they hadn't really considered those possibilities.
And I'll even add something that I'm noticing in what you're saying. When you're asking someone for a pain point versus asking them for what's working well, when you're asking for a pain point, it's almost like you're setting yourself in the role of the expert. They're going to tell me their pain point. I'm going to tell them what I've seen work in other leaders that I've coached, or what I think, as opposed to when they're already going towards, oh, this is working and that's working. It's like they're more in a coaching mindset.
Absolutely. And you can attach stories to both. That's what business development is, right? Let me tell you about a story of another client, and that's how we build on that. But it gives you something more leverage.
Okay, so comments. This is what people are saying. Oh, okay, we have a question coming up. I'm going to check if we have, oh yes. Okay, so let me tell you what people are taking away first, and then go right into the question. So people are taking away, focusing on the positive will help move forward. Mm-hmm. It sounds like will help myself, or the organization will help move forward. And then, okay, we have two questions coming your way. First question, how can you get a colleague? Excuse me for a second, Sandy. I just want to make sure I've gotten all of this. Whoa, we have three questions coming your way. How can you get a colleague or a team to keep you in the loop, like emails, when a decision by leadership is required? Interesting.
So could you read that again?
How can you get a colleague or a team to keep you in the loop, like emails when a decision by leadership is required?
Okay. To me, it's, do they want to have me included? So what kind of questions am I asking to make sure that I'm included and valued in that? I know myself, and I've been in corporate for years, I can feel slighted. And so I'll stop and think, what story am I telling? So I make sure that I'm asking the right questions of the right people to make sure that I'm in the loop.
So you're saying for that kind of thing, make sure that you're there ahead of time, just asking the right questions of the right people so that it's kind of a natural invitation.
I think so. Of course, let's make sure Sonia's here. Yeah.
Yeah, because she's been asking us about this. We're thinking of her as a strategic colleague. I follow that. Okay, here's a question for you. How do we use this kind of inquiry in retrospective? So suppose, for example, you're in a high tech, you've just launched the product, and then in retrospective, you ask, and I'll read this off, what did we not do well? What did we do well? What should we stop doing? So those are typical things that can come up. So the question this person is asking is, should we separate the negative questions and the positive questions almost into separate sessions of debriefs after a project is over?
First of all, I applaud you for having debriefs. A lot of groups don't, and I don't know if you need to do that. I think, sometimes people ask, well, how do I ask questions and where does that come from? There's this natural source of inquiry. So you can say, okay, what worked well? What could we have done more of? That's kind of the what didn't we do well kind of thing. But make sure you've got your thread of questions. You can ask both, I think. Just watching the arc, I think, is important. If it starts to go down the tunnel of what we didn't do well, I don't think it's really hard to pull yourself out of it. Is that clear enough as of a response?
So if I summarize for the person, you're saying, yes, ask both, but maybe start with the questions that open people up.
I think start, and I would err towards more of those questions and play with them and experiment, right? Sometimes it takes time for a group, or all of us struggle with change. So we just come in there and we're used to going down the what was broken, what didn't work avenue. I would say start peppering other questions in. That might be helpful too.
Yeah. Start peppering other questions and start with these broad questions. And it like you're saying, it's hard to sometimes shift the vibe of a discussion.
Yeah. It's remarkable, though. I would love to hear back from people that give it a try, because it's one of those things you go, what? It actually works.
That's true. Sometimes somebody tells you, ask this question and it's going to be good. And then you ask and you're, that actually, yeah, exactly.
I know.
That's really funny. All right, next question your way. What would be a follow-up question to what do you hope to see to help them work towards that?
Yeah, so what do I hope to see? I hope to see us have this amount of revenue and be helping this amount of people. Okay, but what can we do to help you get there? What might we do to get there? Because now you've set the vision out, and so what might be some steps to get there would be an avenue I might go. So you've gotten the broader picture, and then how might you do it? How have you done it in the past? Wow, we did that 5 years ago. What did we do that worked that got us there then? Is another really nice branch to take.
So get them clear on where they hope to get to, and then figure out either how they've done it in the past or even just steps to get there now.
Absolutely. The vision's there, and now how do we get there?
How do we build it? There's a follow-up question on the retrospective, and that question is, in retrospective groups, I actually agree with this. In retrospectives like this, people in groups tend to give politically correct answers, or the answers that they might want their managers to hear. How do you get real feedback, both positive and negative?
Well, in my world, thinking about that, perhaps doing some breaking down of the groups first, right? And maybe there's a roll-up. It's a risk too, and it's unfortunate. We do have our negativity bias. It can be a risk to talk about what worked. So maybe break it down a little bit and start some questioning before the group meeting, so that you can kind of start presenting it that way. And again, these things, it's fundamentally Appreciative Inquiry, or AI, is a change tool. So we're looking for change. It doesn't happen overnight. So think about what works, and whether it's, getting it more incremental first might be an idea.
So how could this person use it to get more real feedback from people?
Well, I think what's working is also real feedback. So A thought I would have, and whenever I've floated change by, is to speak to individuals first. Start
Mm,
maybe you one-on-one individually and start getting that. You're going to get your confidence up, but you're also going to help them start to think a little differently. So I would really do one-on-one. If you think about it, there's this whole concept called the Appreciative Inquiry Summit, and it starts with people asking questions of individuals. So I would break it down to the individual level.
that makes a lot of sense. So you're saying almost like set the stage for when you do go into that retrospective, but already have a few key people.
And just like I said at the beginning of this talk, that we have a positive and negative in each moment. So all you're doing is asking them to look over here and maybe not over here. Stuff still happened. I would argue even if a project is a failure, there is learning from that failure. So what worked? Well, we learned not to do that again. Okay, that's a learning.
Yeah. And
So.
Sandy, sometimes a lot of people, when you start with one of these questions, not a lot, but a few people will say, oh, why are you asking? Because they're so used to what went wrong, what do we have to fix next time? But why you're asking is because you want to replicate the things that went really well. This
Yeah,
project ended. You want those. If you don't capture them, you may never replicate them again. And why lose that?
absolutely. Maybe the communication was really good. The content wasn't correct or it didn't go down the right avenue, but there's something, and it's not fake or false. That's the other piece, right? This is just as real as what was broken.
Yeah. It's real, it's actionable. It's not like we're just trying to have a good feeling in a postmortem or in a debrief or in a retrospective. We want real
Oh,
content.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Other questions for Sandy, please type them in. We're seeing all your questions, so please type in what other questions. What else, Sandy, as you're hearing these questions, what other thoughts come to mind in terms of your own experience with asking these kinds of questions or putting them into the front of meetings? What other thoughts come to mind?
I think it is trusting yourself. I've recently been doing a lot of, like all of us, right, a lot of Zoom calls, and I've been going into groups, leadership groups that aren't used to this type of question, and I will open it up with, so tell me what's going on. What's been working lately with your teams? And I have them break out into pairs. Because again, it's kind of scary for me to maybe feel like I'm being too filled with hubris or too full of myself to say, well, my team has happy hours every night and they're great, right? So I have them break into pairs. But these questions really work. And I literally do that. And then what would you like to see more of? And they start having those conversations. Part of it is icebreaker. It gets people to talk and have a good conversation. And also part of it's information. But it's trusting it. And I promise you, try it on a small scale. It does work.
So try it, for example, with someone you have regular meetings with at work or with a family member. Okay, what is the first thing that people walking out of this mini webinar, what's the first thing they should try? The one thing they should try?
I think that if they're in a team meeting, then asking people, if you're a manager, ask people to come prepared with just a quick little what's gone well this week. It can be my toddler learned how to walk, or so-and-so learned how to ride a bike, or I don't know, whatever it is, but just start with that one small thing, and starting then even more than that, asking myself at the end of the day, what went well, right? What went well today, and really focusing on it.
So actually, and this is nice because you're not saying shock them with it in a meeting, but maybe send it out in the agenda. And one other thing I'm going to ask you is this. So give people a heads up, because some people need a little more thinking time, not for any reason. They just want to recall the situation that happened.
Yeah, I worked with a manager once. He had his people as part of his, he would have a weekly update, right? People would send in their updates, which they're hard to get and they're hard to do. He would have people, though, share one thing that went well that week. So not only did they share that, which was more uplifting for them to write and for him to hear, however, they were all week looking for what am I going to put in that's working. So they're shifting their focus all along. Again, that imperceptible shift.
Thank you so much, Sandy. Thank you so much for everyone being with us. This was About Inquiry with Sandy Lewis. We're going to stay on for about 2 or 3 minutes because we've got a couple of coaches. I know not everybody on this, a few people on this line are coaches, and we've got a question about coaching. So for everybody who is not interested in coaching, thank you so much, and we'll see you later. See you tomorrow. Tomorrow is me, actually. I'm talking about confidence. And then, so what do you do when you don't have confidence in something? And then Thursday is Margarita Tarragona, and she's speaking about the stories of you, the personal stories we have. So we'll stay on for just a couple of minutes. Thank you so much. People are saying great session. Thank you.
Thank you.
All the best. See you at 11 a.m. Pacific. All right, we have a couple of people on this call who are coaches, and here's a question that came in. How does one work towards becoming a business coach? And I wonder if you just have a couple of minutes to give some comments on that.
Yeah. So it's funny because, you know, coaching, we're bringing our whole selves. And when I first started coaching and you were with me, Senya, I was like, I'm just going to be a coach. I'm going to coach. And then I remembered, oh, right, I have like 2 decades of human resources experience.
People come up to me all the time in the hallway asking me to coach them. Exactly.
Right? Exactly. So what do you have that, to me, you know, I'm really, really passionate about the fact that I believe that the workplace is a place where we can flourish. And once I'm in that window, or that's my window in, then I don't care. I'll talk about meditation. I work with families. It doesn't matter what it is, but it's in the workplace function. So I would say, what work experience have you had that you can apply? It's almost more of a kind of a contextual thing. I don't usually talk about my work experience, but they know where I come from, and then there's some context I can bring to it, if that helps.
So you're saying in conversation with companies or people who may want to hire you, keep bringing up other work that you've done with businesses, with companies, with growing businesses, whatever that may be.
Yeah, and frankly, it doesn't even have to be as a paid client. It can be stories that I have from when I was in workplaces. So it doesn't have to be as a consultant or a coach either.
So exactly, whatever work experience you've had, where you have had. Great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you again. We look forward to seeing you again. Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you, Sonia. It was wonderful.
All the best. All right, I'm going to
Thanks.
wrap everything down and see everyone again tomorrow.